Hey guys, tonight we step aboard a creaking wooden ship that smells like salt, sweat and very bad decisions. The kind of place where the horizon never changes, the rules are unclear, and the people around you look like they've already accepted a slightly miserable fate. You're not here by choice, of course, no one ever really is, and if you're thinking you'll just adjust and maybe enjoy the adventure, well, you probably won't survive this. But hey, at least it'll make for a relaxing story. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't remember the exact moment things went wrong. Maybe it was the dockside argument that wasn't yours. Maybe it was being in the wrong place when the wrong ship needed hands. Or maybe, like many unfortunate souls in the early 18th century, you were simply convenient. One moment you're standing on solid ground, the next you're being shoved forward, boots scraping against damp wooden planks as unfamiliar hands grip your shoulders. The ship looms above you, larger than it seemed from the shore, its dark hull scarred from previous voyages. The ropes creak overhead like something alive. Someone laughs behind you, not kindly. You're pushed again, harder this time, and you stumble up the gangplank. The smell hits you immediately, salt, tar, stale water, and something far worse lingering beneath it all. It's the scent of too many people, in too little space for far too long. Historically, this wasn't uncommon. During what's often called the Golden Age of piracy, roughly between 1650 and 1730, many sailors didn't join willingly. Press ganging, forcing men into service, was a real practice, especially in naval fleets, but pirates weren't above it either when they needed crew. Historians still argue whether pirates were more democratic than naval ships, but one thing is certain: if you were dragged aboard, your vote didn't count for much. The deck shifts beneath your feet as the ship gently rocks. It's subtle now, almost calming, but there's something unsettling about how constant it is. You look back toward the shore, but it already feels farther away than it should. Don't bother, someone mutters nearby, noticing your glance. Land's not your concern anymore. That sentence settles into your chest heavier than you expect. Around you, the crew moves with practiced ease. They don't seem strong in the heroic sense, no shining armour or dramatic poses, but there's a rough efficiency to them. Every motion is purposeful, every glance assessing. You, on the other hand, feel like a misplaced object. A man steps closer. He's not dressed like a captain from the storybooks, no dramatic hat or polished coat, but there's something in the way others subtly shift around him that makes his role clear. Authority doesn't need decoration here. He studies you for a moment, then shrugs. Can you work? It's not really a question. You hesitate, and that's your first mistake. The laughter comes again, louder this time, spreading across the deck. Not cruel exactly, but not kind either. More like amusement at something predictable. Doesn't matter, the man says. You'll learn, or you won't. There's no follow-up explanation, no comforting reassurance. Just a nod to someone else, and suddenly you're no longer his concern. That's when it hits you. You're not important here. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You're handed a coil of rope that feels heavier than it looks, rough fibres biting into your palms. No instructions come with it. Just a gesture toward a section of the deck where others are already working, pulling, tying, adjusting. You watch for a moment, trying to understand the rhythm. There's a system here, clearly, but it's not explained. It's absorbed, copied, survived. So you mimic. Your hands move awkwardly at first, fumbling with knots that seem deceptively simple. Someone nearby clicks their tongue in irritation and reaches over, correcting your grip with a sharp tug. Like this, they mutter, unless you want the mask coming down on your head. You nod quickly, even though your fingers are already sore. Time stretches in a strange way out here. The sun hangs above you, bright and indifferent, while the ship continues its slow, inevitable departure from everything familiar. At some point, you realise you can't hear the sounds of land anymore. No distant voices, no market noise, just the constant creak of wood, the flap of sails, and the endless breathing of the ocean. There's a strange detail you notice as you work, a small one, but oddly memorable. Tied to one of the rigging lines is a faded scrap of cloth, fluttering weakly in the breeze. It doesn't seem functional, just there. Sailors were, and are, deeply superstitious. Some believed small charms like that could protect the ship from bad luck. Others thought certain objects held onto the spirit of previous voyages. It's impossible to say which belief this one belongs to, but no one removes it. You consider asking, but decide against it. You're already drawing enough attention just by being new. The hours pass, marked only by the changing angle of the sun and the growing ache in your arms. No one formally announces your role, your schedule, or your place in the hierarchy. You simply exist where you're needed, until someone louder or stronger decides otherwise. Eventually the shoreline disappears completely, and with it, any illusion that this is temporary. A breeze picks up, stronger now, carrying the sharp tang of open sea. The ship responds immediately, sails tightening, wood groaning as if in protest. The gentle rocking becomes more pronounced, less comforting. You grip the rope tighter, instinctively. Someone nearby grins. "First time?" they ask. You nod. They chuckle, not unkindly this time. Give it a day. You'll stop noticing. You're not sure if that's reassuring or not, because right now, you notice everything. The instability beneath your feet, the unfamiliar faces around you, the quiet understanding that no one is coming to take you back. And as the ship pushes further into open water, you begin to understand something else too. This isn't an adventure, it's a test. And you've already been thrown into it without preparation, without choice, and without any guarantee that you'll make it through. The rope burns in your hands again as you pull, harder this time, trying to match the rhythm of the others. The ship creaks, the sails strain, and the ocean stretches endlessly in every direction. There's no turning back now. You don't realise how tired you are until someone finally gestures for you to go below deck. It isn't a kind gesture, it's more like being dismissed. The sky above has already begun to dim, shifting from harsh brightness into a dull, fading orange. For a brief moment it almost feels peaceful, the way evenings sometimes do when the world slows down. But that illusion doesn't follow you as you duck beneath the low wooden beams and descend into the ship's interior. The air changes immediately. Up on deck at least there was movement, wind, salt, space. Down here everything feels trapped. The smell is heavier, thicker, pressing into your nose and throat with every breath. Damp wood, stale sweat, unwashed bodies, and something sour you can't quite identify but wish you could avoid. You pause halfway down the steps, instinctively hesitating. "Move," someone snaps behind you. You move. The space below deck is far smaller than you imagined. The ceiling forces you to hunch slightly, and the dim light, coming from a few flickering lanterns, does little to reveal anything clearly. Shadows stretch awkwardly across the beams, shifting with every movement of the ship. You expected hammocks, maybe something resembling order. Instead, you find chaos. Men are already settling in wherever there's space. Some sling hammocks low between beams, fabric sagging under their weight. Others don't bother, simply lying against rough planks with a bundle of cloth under their heads. There's no assigned spot waiting for you, no welcome, no explanation. You just fit yourself in. Historically, pirate ships, and really most ships of this era, were overcrowded by necessity. Space was a luxury reserved for cargo, not comfort. Even naval vessels operated under similar conditions, but pirates often pushed capacity further. More crew meant more strength in battle, more hands for sails, and more bodies packed into the same suffocating space. Historians still argue whether pirate crews had better living conditions than naval sailors, due to shared loot and looser rules. But standing here now, breathing in air that feels already used, you'd struggle to call this better in any meaningful sense. You find a narrow gap between two beams and lower yourself into it. The wood beneath you is uneven, pressing awkwardly into your side. You try adjusting, shifting slightly, but there's no comfortable position, just less uncomfortable ones. Above you, a hammock creaks loudly as someone rolls over. To your left, someone coughs. Not a simple cough either. Deep, rattling, the kind that seems to echo inside their chest before finally escaping. You try not to think about it. A lantern swings gently overhead, its weak light tracing slow arcs across the ceiling. The motion of the ship feels stronger down here. more noticeable without the distraction of the horizon. Each sway shifts your balance just enough to keep you from fully relaxing. Sleep doesn't come easily. Instead, your mind lingers on every detail. The heat, for one. It's warmer below deck, but not in a comforting way. It's a damp, clinging warmth that sticks to your skin. Your clothes feel heavier, slightly wet from sweat and sea air. Then there's the sound. Up above, footsteps continue long after darkness settles. Orders are shouted, ropes pulled, sails adjusted. The ship never truly rests. It just changes rhythm. Closer to you, the sounds are more personal. Murmured conversations, soft groans, the occasional snore, loud and unapologetic. At one point, someone laughs quietly in their sleep, a strange, almost unsettling sound in the dimness. You close your eyes, hoping that shutting out the sight will make everything else fade. It doesn't. There's a small detail you notice after a while, a strange one. Hanging from one of the beams near you is a tiny carved object, no larger than your thumb. It looks like a crude animal, maybe a bird worn smooth by time. You stare at it longer than you intend. Sailors often carried small tokens like these. Some believed they held protective powers. Others treated them as reminders of home, something familiar in a place where nothing else was. There's even a lesser-known belief that certain carvings were meant to trap bad luck, keeping it from spreading through the ship. You're not sure which this one is, but no one touches it. Eventually, exhaustion begins to outweigh discomfort. Your body sinks slightly into the hard surface beneath you, muscles loosening despite your resistance. The constant motion of the ship becomes almost rhythmic. Not pleasant exactly, but predictable. You begin to drift, and just as you do, a sudden crash jolts you awake. Something heavy shifts somewhere in the ship, followed by a string of curses from above. The entire structure seems to groan in response, wood flexing under pressure. You sit up slightly, heart racing, only to bump your head against the beam above. Pain flashes briefly, sharp and immediate. Get used to it, someone mutters nearby, not even opening their eyes. Ship settles at night. You lie back down, slowly, unsure whether to believe them. The ocean outside is invisible now, but you can feel it more than ever. Each movement of the ship translates directly into your body, a constant reminder that you're floating on something vast and uncontrollable. There's no solid ground here, no stability, just layers of wood between you and something endless. Time passes, minutes, maybe hours. It's impossible to tell. The lantern burns lower, its light dimming further until the space feels even smaller, more enclosed. Your breathing slows, your thoughts blur, and just as you begin to sink into a shallow, uneasy sleep, another sound reaches you. Quieter this time, closer, whispered voices. You don't catch the full conversation, just fragments. New one. Won't last. None of them do. There's no malice in it, no urgency, just quiet observation like they're discussing the weather. You keep your eyes closed, pretend not to hear, because acknowledging it would make it real. And right now, you're not ready for that. Instead, you focus on the motion again. The slow, steady rocking, back and forth, back and forth. It's strange how quickly the body begins to adapt. What felt overwhelming just hours ago now starts to feel normal, not comfortable, not safe, but familiar enough that your mind stops fighting it as hard. Somewhere above, the wind shifts direction. You can hear it in the sails, a different kind of tension in the ropes. Down here, it translates into a slightly sharper tilt. Your body adjusts automatically, and that's when it hits you, just before sleep finally takes hold. This isn't just a place you're stuck in. It's something you're already beginning to adjust to, which might be the most unsettling part of all. Because if this becomes normal, then what comes next probably gets worse. The ship creaks softly around you, the lantern flickers one last time, and the sounds of the crew fade into a low, constant murmur. For now, at least you sleep. Not well, but enough. You wake before you understand why. For a moment, everything is disorienting. The darkness, the smell, the low ceiling pressing in above you. Your body feels stiff, as if you've been folded into a shape it doesn't quite agree with. Then, the sound reaches you. Bootsteps. Loud. Deliberate. Followed by a voice. Up. All of you. There's no urgency in it, but there doesn't need to be. The tone alone is enough to pull people from sleep. Around you, bodies shift, hammocks creak, and a chorus of quiet groans fills the cramped space. You hesitate for half a second too long. A sharp knock lands against the beam near your head. Up, the voice repeats, closer now. You're moving before you fully register it, pushing yourself upright, ignoring the protest in your muscles. The carved charm you noticed earlier sways slightly above you, as if even it has been disturbed by the command. The air feels even heavier this morning, or whatever passes for morning down here. There's no sunlight to confirm it, only the routine, and already you sense that routine matters more than anything else. You follow the others up the narrow steps, blinking as the early light hits your eyes. The sky's pale, washed out, and the sea stretches endlessly in every direction. No land, no landmarks, just water and sky, merging into something indistinct at the horizon. For a brief second, you feel smaller than you ever have before. Then someone shoves a bucket into your hands. "Don't stand there," they say. "Deck won't clean itself." And just like that, the day begins. There's no explanation, no instruction manual, only observation and imitation. You watch how others move, how they scrub the wooden planks with seawater, how they throw it in practiced arcs before dragging rough brushes across the surface. You try to copy them. It doesn't go well. The bucket sloshes unevenly, soaking your boots. The brush feels awkward in your grip, its bristles catching against the wood instead of gliding. Your movements are slower, less certain. Someone notices. They always do. "Not like that," a sailor snaps, grabbing the brush from your hands. He demonstrates quickly, short, firm strokes, controlled, efficient. Then he thrusts it back at you. Again. You nod, swallowing whatever response might have come naturally before. Out here, correction isn't optional. It's immediate, and it's constant. Historically, this kind of labour was essential to keeping ships functional. Salt water, grime, and organic build-up could quickly damage the wood, making decks slippery and dangerous. Regular scrubbing wasn't just about cleanliness, it was survival. Some crews even used sand mixed with seawater to increase friction, essentially grinding the deck clean in a process that was as hard on hands as it was on the wood. Historians still argue whether pirate crews enforced these routines as strictly as naval ships did, but judging by the way you're being watched now, there's very little room for laziness here either. You scrub harder. The rhythm begins to settle in. Throw water, scrub, shift, repeat. Your arms ache quickly, muscles protesting the unfamiliar strain. The ship rocks beneath you, turning simple movements into small challenges of balance. At one point, you nearly slip. A hand grabs your shoulder, steadying you. "Careful," someone mutters. "Ocean's always waiting." You glance over, but they've already moved on, disappearing into their own work. The sun climbs slowly, bringing with it a harsh brightness that reflects off the water and into your eyes. There's no shade to retreat to, no pause offered. The work continues, steady and unbroken. And it's not just the deck. As soon as one task ends, another replaces it. Coiling ropes, tightening lines, hauling supplies from one side of the ship to the other. Every movement has a purpose, even if that purpose isn't explained to you. You begin to notice patterns. Certain people give orders, others follow them without question, and then there are people like you, new, uncertain, watched more closely than the rest. Hierarchy isn't announced here. It reveals itself through behaviour, a glance that lingers too long, a command that isn't questioned, a silence that falls when certain individuals pass by. Pirate ships are often romanticised as lawless, equal societies where everyone shares in the loot. And while it's true that some crews practiced a form of collective decision-making, electing captains or voting on major actions, the day-to-day reality was far more structured. Someone always holds more power, and right now, that someone is not you. Midway through the morning, you're handed another task, this time involving the rigging. You look up, following the lines as they stretch toward the towering masts. The height alone makes your stomach tighten. "Up," the voice says, as if it's the simplest thing in the world. You hesitate. Again, a mistake you're already making too often. The sailor beside you sighs, already climbing with effortless speed. He moves like he's done this 1,000 times, because he probably has. You don't have that luxury. Your first step onto the rigging feels wrong immediately. The rope shifts under your weight, swaying slightly with the motion of the ship. Your grip tightens instinctively, fingers digging into the coarse fibres. "Don't fight it," someone calls down. "Move with it." Easier said than done. You climb slowly, each movement deliberate. The deck shrinks beneath you, the figures below becoming smaller, less distinct. The wind feels stronger up here, pulling at your clothes, tugging at your balance. Your heart pounds. You don't look down, not until you accidentally do. The ocean stretches endlessly below, a vast moving surface that suddenly feels much closer than you'd like. Your grip tightens further. There's a strange detail you notice, even in the middle of your unease. Tied along one of the higher lines are small knots, deliberate, evenly spaced. Later, you'll learn these are sometimes used as markers, helping sailors judge sail positions or wind adjustments. But there's also a quieter, more unusual belief tied to them. Some sailors claim that tying the wind into knots could control its strength, loosening one knot to release a breeze, another for a stronger gust. It sounds absurd, but no one laughs at it, not out here. You finally reach a stable point and pause, breathing harder than you expected. Below, the ship continues its steady movement, indifferent to your effort. "Good," someone says from above you. "Now don't fall." It's not encouragement, just a statement of preference. The work continues, adjusting lines, securing knots, following quick instructions that leave little room for error. Your hands begin to burn again, small abrasions forming where the rope rubs against your skin. There's no time to notice for long. By the time you climb back down, your legs feel unsteady, your arms heavy. But there's no rest waiting for you. Just another task, and then another. The day stretches on like this, a chain of effort with no clear end point. At some point, you stop thinking about when it will end. You just focus on the next motion, the next command, the next breath. And somewhere in that repetition, something shifts. Not physically, mentally. You begin to understand that this isn't about doing things perfectly, it's about not failing badly enough to be noticed, which out here might be the closest thing to success you're going to get. The sun hangs high above, the sea endless around you, and the ship continues forward without hesitation. And you, whether you're ready or not, are now part of that motion. By the time someone finally calls for food, you don't feel hungry in the usual way. It's not that sharp, demanding hunger you're used to. The kind that makes your stomach growl and your mind wander toward thoughts of warm meals. This is something duller, heavier, like your body is running low on something essential but hasn't quite decided how loudly to complain about it yet. Still, when the word spreads, everyone moves. Not quickly, not eagerly, just purposefully. You follow them, unsure what to expect but already aware that whatever it is, it won't be much. The meal is distributed with minimal ceremony. A rough wooden bucket is set down, and from it portions are handed out in worn bowls or scraps of tin. When it's your turn, you receive something that looks like a thick, uneven mash. Pale, slightly lumpy, and steaming just enough to suggest it was heated recently. You stare at it for a moment. "Eat," someone says behind you, before it gets worse. That doesn't sound promising. You take a cautious bite. The taste is plain. Almost aggressively so. There's a faint saltiness, a hint of something grain-based, likely oats or barley, but no real flavour beyond that. It's not unpleasant exactly, just empty. Historically, meals like this were common at sea. Porridge, hardtack, and salted meat formed the backbone of most sailors' diets. Hardtack in particular, essentially a dense dry biscuit, was infamous for its durability. It could last months, even years, without spoiling. The problem was, it often came with extras. You glance at someone nearby, watching as they casually tap a piece of hardtack against the edge of their bowl. A few tiny specks fall out onto the deck. They don't seem bothered. In fact, they pick up the biscuit and continue eating. There's a quiet understanding here that you're not sure you're ready for. Historians still argue whether sailors genuinely accepted this as normal, or simply had no choice but to tolerate it. Either way, complaints don't seem to be part of the routine. You take another bite of your own portion, trying not to think too much about it. It goes down easily enough. Too easily, almost. The portion is small, smaller than you'd expect after a morning like the one you've had. And yet, no one asks for more, no one lingers once they've finished. The bowls are emptied quickly, efficiently, and then set aside without comment. Food, you realise, isn't something to enjoy here. It's something to manage. Water comes next, or what passes for it. You're handed a container, wooden, slightly warped, and inside is a liquid that looks clear enough but smells faintly off. Not spoiled exactly, but not fresh either. You hesitate. Drink, the same voice says again, this time with less patience. You do. The taste is strange, flat, slightly bitter. It lingers in a way clean water never does. Stored water on long voyages often developed this kind of quality. Barrels, once filled, were sealed and left to sit for weeks or months. Over time, algae, bacteria, and the wood itself would alter the taste. Sometimes sailors added small amounts of alcohol, like rum or beer, to make it more tolerable. Other times, they just drank it as it was. You swallow another mouthful, trying not to react. Around you, no one seems concerned. They drink, wipe their mouths, and move on. Just like with the food, it's treated as a necessity, nothing more. There's a small moment, though, that catches your attention. One of the older sailors takes a different container from his belt. He opens it briefly, takes a quick sip, and closes it again. The smell that escapes is sharper, stronger. Rum, maybe. He notices you looking and smirks slightly. Not for you, he says. Not yet, at least. There's a hierarchy even in something as simple as this. As the meal ends, the ship settles back into its rhythm. Work resumes almost immediately, as if the break never happened. There's no extended rest, no lingering conversation, just motion. But something feels different now. Your body, even with the small amount of food, feels slightly steadier. Not stronger exactly, but less hollow. Enough to keep going, which you suspect is the entire point. As the day continues, you begin to notice how carefully everything is rationed. Food is measured, water is controlled, even effort seems distributed with a kind of efficiency that leaves little room for waste. Pirate ships, despite their reputation for chaos, often relied on strict resource management. Supplies had to last unpredictable lengths of time, and poor planning could mean starvation long before reaching any port. There's no room for excess out here, no margin for error. At one point, you're sent to help move barrels below deck. As you roll one into place, the lid shifts slightly, releasing a faint scent. Not unpleasant, just stale. You pause, curious. Leave it, someone warns immediately. Unless you want trouble. You let go. Some things, you're learning, aren't yours to question. As the sun begins its slow descent, the light softens slightly, casting longer shadows across the deck. The heat fades just enough to be noticeable, replaced by a cooler breeze that carries the scent of open sea. It should feel refreshing, but your body is too tired to fully appreciate it. There's another detail you notice, almost absent-mindedly. A small piece of citrus peel, dried and brittle, tied to a section of rope near the mast. It seems out of place. Citrus, historically, was one of the few known remedies against scurvy, a disease caused by vitamin C deficiency. Sailors who lacked fresh fruits and vegetables for extended periods often suffered from it. Weakness, gum disease, and worse. Some crews carried citrus when they could. Others relied on luck, and sometimes small symbolic gestures, like that dried peel, served as a reminder of something they rarely had, or perhaps a hope that they might again. Historians still argue when the widespread understanding of scurvy prevention truly took hold, but for now, out here, it seems more like a distant concept than an active solution. The day winds down slowly, though not gently. Your movements have become more automatic now, less thought, more repetition. You lift, pull, scrub, carry, each task blending into the next until time itself feels less defined. Hunger doesn't return the way you expect. It lingers quietly, just beneath the surface, managed, controlled, like everything else here. As the light fades further and the call finally comes to head below again, you don't hesitate this time. Your body moves toward rest without needing instruction, not because it wants comfort, but because it needs recovery. You descend into the same cramped space, the same heavy air, the same dim lantern light, and as you settle back into your narrow place between the beams, something becomes clear. This isn't temporary discomfort. This is the baseline. Food will never be enough. Water will never be truly fresh. And the idea of satisfaction, of feeling full, refreshed, content, has already begun to slip further away than the shoreline you left behind. The ship creaks softly as night settles in again, and you, with just enough in your system to keep going, prepare to do it all over again. By the next day, or what you assume is the next day since time has already started to blur, you begin to understand something more important than food, water, or even rest. Who matters? It's not written anywhere. No one gathers you to explain it. There's no neat chart or list of ranks, but it becomes obvious in the way people move, the way they speak, and more importantly, the way others react to them. You notice it first during a simple task. You're coiling rope again, badly, if the looks you're getting are anything to go by, when a man steps onto the deck from the stern. The change is immediate. Conversations lower, movements sharpen. Even the ones who seemed half asleep moments ago suddenly find focus. He doesn't say anything at first. He doesn't need to. Authority, you realise, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just expected. On pirate ships, leadership could be surprisingly structured. The captain held power during battle, making critical decisions in moments where hesitation could mean death. But outside of combat, authority was often shared, or at least limited, by roles like the quartermaster, who represented the crew's interests. Historians still argue whether this system made pirate ships more democratic than naval vessels, or if it simply redistributed control in a way that still left most people, like you, at the bottom. Because from where you're standing, it doesn't feel democratic. It feels layered. The man at the stern finally speaks, issuing a short command. You don't catch all of it, but you don't need to. The reaction tells you everything. People move instantly, adjusting sails, shifting positions, correcting whatever small imperfections he's noticed. No hesitation, no argument. You glance at the sailor next to you. "Captain," you whisper. He snorts quietly. "No," he says, "but close enough that it doesn't matter to you." That's not reassuring. A second figure appears not long after. Different energy, different presence. Where the first man was calm and controlled, this one is sharper, more direct. He moves through the crew, stopping occasionally to inspect work, to adjust, to correct. When he reaches you, he doesn't slow down. He stops. You freeze. Rope still half coiled in your hands. He looks at it, then at you. There's a pause. Not long, but long enough to stretch. "Too loose," he says finally. Before you can respond, he takes the rope, reworks the coil in a matter of seconds, and hands it back. Again. No raised voice, no threat, but the message is clear. Do it right, or keep doing it until you do. You nod, more quickly this time, and start over. This, you realise, is how discipline works here. Not always through punishment, but through expectation. Still, punishment exists. You see it later. It happens quickly. So quickly you almost miss the beginning of it. A sailor, not much older than you, hesitates during an order, just a fraction too long. Maybe he didn't hear it clearly. Maybe he misjudged something. It doesn't matter. The reaction is immediate. A sharp command. A hand grabbing his arm. He's pulled forward, forced to face the man who gave the order. There's no dramatic speech, no drawn-out scolding. Just a single controlled strike. Not excessive, not brutal, but enough. Enough to remind everyone watching. The deck goes quiet for a moment after. Then the work resumes. No one comments, no one intervenes. Because this too is part of the structure. Discipline aboard ships like this varied widely. Some captains were known for harsh punishments, others for relative fairness. Pirate codes, when they existed, sometimes outlined rules and consequences, agreed upon by the crew before a voyage began. But those codes didn't always protect everyone equally, especially not someone new. You keep your head down after that. Your movements become more careful, more deliberate. You watch more closely, listen more intently. Every action is measured against an unspoken standard you're still trying to understand. There's a strange detail you notice during all this. A small one, but oddly telling. Near the main mast, carved faintly into the wood, are a series of marks. Lines, grouped together, uneven but intentional. You count them without meaning to. 5, then another 5, then 3 more. Not decoration, something else. Later, you hear someone mention it in passing, quietly, almost casually. Tally marks, a way of keeping track of something. Days, perhaps. or shares of loot, or something less pleasant. No one explains fully, and you don't ask. Some knowledge, your learning, comes with a cost. As the day progresses, the hierarchy becomes clearer. At the top, the ones who give orders. Below them, the experienced crew, those who move with confidence, who rarely get corrected, who sometimes even question things, carefully. And at the bottom, you, along with a few others who look just as uncertain, just as out of place. You catch their expressions occasionally, quick glances, shared understanding without words. You're all trying to do the same thing, not stand out, not fail, just remain. It's not ambition that drives you here, it's survival. There's a moment in the afternoon when things slow slightly, not a full stop, but a brief easing of intensity. You take the opportunity to stretch your arms, rolling your shoulders to ease the constant ache. Big mistake. Resting, a voice cuts in. You straighten immediately. No, you reply. The man studies you for a second, then nods toward a stack of supplies. Then carry those. Of course, there's always more. You move quickly, lifting the crates, heavier than you expect, and carrying them across the deck. Your muscles protest, your grip weakens slightly, but you don't stop. Because now you understand something you didn't before. It's not about whether you can do the work, it's about whether you keep doing it. Without complaint, without hesitation, without drawing attention. Historians often debate the idea of pirate freedom, the notion that these ships were places of escape from rigid societal structures. And in some ways, that may have been true for certain individuals. But standing here, feeling the weight of expectation pressing down from all sides, it's hard to see it that way. Freedom, out here, feels selective. And right now, it doesn't include you. As the sun begins to dip again, casting long shadows across the deck, the pace finally starts to ease. Not because the work is done, but because it never truly is. It just pauses. You take a slow breath, the salty air filling your lungs, and for a brief moment, you allow yourself to look around. At the crew, at the ship, at the endless stretch of ocean beyond. And you realize something quietly unsettling. You're starting to recognize the patterns, the rhythms, the rules, not because they've been taught to you, but because you've had no choice but to learn them, and that means you're no longer entirely lost here. Which should feel like progress, but somehow it doesn't. Because the better you understand this place, the more you realize how little control you actually have within it. It starts with a change so subtle you almost miss it. The wind shifts. At first, it's just a slight difference in how it brushes past your face. Cooler, sharper, carrying a weight that wasn't there before. The sails respond before you fully register it, tightening with a low, strained sound that ripples across the rigging. You glance upward. The sky looks different. Not dramatically, not yet. But the pale blue has dulled, a faint grey creeping in from the edges like ink spreading through water. The horizon, once clear and endless, now feels blurred, less defined, harder to trust. No one announces anything, but the crew notices. You can tell by the way they move. Faster now, more focused. Conversations fade, replaced by short, clipped commands. The easy rhythm of the day disappears, replaced by something tighter. Controlled. Anticipation. "Storm coming," someone mutters as they pass you. The words settle uneasily in your chest. You've seen storms before, of course, from land, from a distance. The kind where you watch dark clouds roll in, hear thunder in the distance, and then retreat somewhere dry and solid. This is not that. There's nowhere to retreat to here. The first real gust hits without warning. The ship lurches, not violently, but enough to throw off your balance. You grab onto the nearest rope instinctively, your fingers tightening as the wind pushes harder against the sails. "Move!" a voice shouts. You don't question it. You move. The next few moments blur together into a series of commands you barely understand but follow anyway. Lines are pulled, knots adjusted, sails partially lowered. The crew works with a kind of urgency that doesn't feel panicked, but isn't calm either. It's practiced, which somehow makes it more unsettling. Historically, storms were one of the greatest dangers at sea. More ships were lost to weather than to combat, especially during the age of sail. Without modern forecasting, sailors relied on experience, observation, and sometimes sheer instinct to prepare. Historians still argue how much of storm survival came down to skill versus luck. Standing here now, gripping a rope that feels like your only connection to stability, you're starting to suspect it's both. The sky darkens further, the wind rises, and then the rain begins. Not gently. It hits hard, sharp droplets stinging against your skin as they're driven sideways by the wind. Within seconds, you're soaked. Your clothes cling to you, heavier now, colder. The deck becomes slick beneath your feet. You almost slip again. This time, no one steadies you. You catch yourself, barely, and keep moving. "Hold that line," someone shouts, pointing directly at you. You grab it without hesitation, wrapping it around your hands as you've seen others do. The rope strains immediately, pulling against you with a force that surprises you. It's not just wind you're fighting. It's the entire sail catching that wind, transferring the pressure down through the rigging. Your arms tense. Your grip tightens. For a moment it feels manageable. Then the ship pitches. Harder this time. The horizon tilts violently, the deck angling beneath your feet as the vessel rides over a growing wave. Your stomach lurches, your balance falters, but the rope holds you in place. Barely. "Lean into it," someone yells. You try. The next wave hits with a heavy thud against the hull, sending a shudder through the entire structure. Water splashes across the deck, cold and relentless, pooling briefly before rushing back toward the edges. You're breathing harder now, faster. Everything feels louder. The wind howls through the rigging, the sails snap and strain, the wood creaks under pressure. It's a constant barrage of sound, each one layered over the other until it becomes almost overwhelming. And through it all, the crew keeps working. No one freezes, no one hesitates. They move with the storm, adjusting, reacting, correcting. It's not graceful, but it's effective. You try to match them. You really do. But your movements are slower, less certain. You don't anticipate the shifts, you react to them, always a step behind. At one point, the rope jerks suddenly, yanking your hands forward. The friction burns instantly, sharp and immediate. You grit your teeth, refusing to let go, because you've already learned what happens when you hesitate. There's a strange detail you notice in the middle of all this chaos. Tied near the base of the mast is a small bundle, cloth, tightly wrapped around something you can't see. It flaps wildly in the wind, but the knot holding it in place doesn't loosen. You hear someone shout near it, not a command, but something else, a phrase you don't quite catch. Later, you'll realise it sounded like a prayer. Sailors have always been superstitious, especially during storms. Some believed in charms, others in rituals, others in whispered words meant to appease whatever forces controlled the sea. There's even an old belief that whistling during a storm could make it worse, calling the wind to grow stronger. No one is whistling now. The storm intensifies, the rain thickens, turning the world into a blur of grey and white. Visibility drops. The horizon disappears completely, replaced by towering waves that rise and fall unpredictably. The ship climbs one, then drops. Your stomach follows, that brief weightless moment turning into a heavy slam as the hull meets water again. You almost lose your grip. Almost. Hold! The command cuts through everything else. You hold. Because there's nothing else you can do. Time loses meaning here. Minutes stretch into something longer, each second filled with effort, tension. There's no clear point where the storm is at its worst. It just is, relentless. At some point your arms begin to shake, not from fear, but from strain. The constant pull, the need to adjust, to resist, it wears you down faster than anything else you've experienced so far. And still, the work continues. Finally, gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, the wind begins to ease. The rain softens. The waves, while still strong, lose some of their violent edge. The crew doesn't relax immediately. They keep moving, keep adjusting, as if waiting for the storm to prove it's truly passing. Only when the sky lightens slightly, just enough to distinguish shapes again, does the tension begin to release. You loosen your grip on the rope slowly, your hands aching as the pressure fades. Your entire body feels drained, not just tired, used. The deck is soaked, the air cold, the ship still rocking beneath you, but something has shifted. You made it through. Not because you were ready, not because you were skilled, but because you held on. You glance around at the others. They look the same as before, wet, tired, focused. But there's a subtle difference, a shared understanding perhaps, or just the quiet acknowledgement that this is part of life here. Storms come, storms go, and you endure them. There's no celebration, no moment of relief, just a return to routine. Because out here, survival isn't an achievement, it's an expectation. The sky continues to clear slowly, revealing a pale, washed-out blue behind the retreating clouds. The sea settles into a rough but manageable rhythm, and the ship sails on, as if nothing happened, as if it hadn't just reminded you how small you are, how fragile, and how quickly everything could have ended, without warning, without ceremony, without anyone to mark your absence. You take a slow breath, tasting salt and rain and something else beneath it, something heavier, because now you know. This place doesn't just test your strength, it tests your ability to endure things you never asked for. And keep going anyway. The storm may have passed, but it leaves something behind. Not damage, at least not the kind you can immediately see. Something quieter, something that settles into the ship the same way dampness seeps into wood. At first, it's just a cough. You hear it somewhere below deck that night, low and persistent. Not unusual, people cough all the time here. The air alone is enough to irritate your throat, but this one lingers longer than most, dragging on in a way that feels heavier. You try to ignore it. Sleep is already difficult enough. But by morning, it's not just one cough, it's several. Scattered throughout the crew, different rhythms, different tones, but all carrying that same underlying weight. A reminder that whatever the storm stirred up didn't just affect the sails and the sea, it reached the people too. The air below deck feels worse than before, thicker, warmer. The dampness from the storm hasn't had time to dry, clinging to the wooden walls, soaking into clothes, settling into every corner of the space. You take a breath and immediately regret it. There's a sharpness now, something faintly sour layered over the usual mix of sweat and salt. Up, the voice calls again. Routine doesn't pause for discomfort. You rise with the others, though your body feels slower today. Heavier, not weak exactly, but not as responsive as it was before. On deck, the sky's clear again, the ocean calmer. It's almost difficult to believe what you went through just hours ago. But the ship remembers. You can see it in the small details. A loose line being retied, a section of wood freshly reinforced, a sail patched hastily, the stitching uneven but functional. And then there are the people. One of the sailors moves past you more slowly than before, his usual efficiency dulled. Another leans briefly against the railing before catching himself and continuing. No one comments, but everyone notices. Historically, disease was one of the deadliest aspects of life at sea. Close quarters, poor sanitation, and limited medical knowledge created the perfect environment for illness to spread. Fevers, infections, and deficiencies could move through a crew quickly, sometimes wiping out entire ships. Historians still argue which conditions were most common, whether it was scurvy, dysentery, or respiratory illnesses, but the consensus is clear on one thing. Once sickness took hold, it rarely stayed contained. You're given your usual tasks, and at first, you're almost relieved. Work is familiar now, predictable, something you can focus on instead of the subtle unease creeping through the ship. You scrub, you carry, you pull lines and adjust knots, but the sounds follow you. Coughing, clearing throats, a quiet groan here and there quickly stifled. At one point you notice a sailor pause mid-task, pressing a hand against his chest, as if trying to steady something inside. He recovers quickly, glancing around to see if anyone noticed. You look away, not out of indifference, but because you're starting to understand that attention can be dangerous. There's a strange detail you notice later in the day. Near one of the barrels below deck, someone has placed a small bundle of dried herbs, tied together with string, hanging loosely from a nail. It doesn't look like much, but the smell is different, sharper, slightly bitter, but cleaner than the surrounding air. Sailors often carried herbs for a variety of reasons, some for cooking, others for what they believed were medicinal properties. In cramped environments like this, certain plants were thought to ward off illness, or at least mask unpleasant odours. Whether they actually worked is another matter, but the fact that they're here at all tells you something. People are trying, even if they don't say it out loud. As the day continues, the effects become harder to ignore. The coughing grows more frequent. A few voices sound weaker when giving responses, And then, during what passes for a brief pause in the work, you see it more clearly. One of the crew members, someone you've seen moving confidently over the past few days, doesn't get up right away. He sits where he is, head lowered, shoulders slumped in a way that doesn't match simple exhaustion. Someone approaches him. There's a short exchange, too quiet for you to hear. Then a hand on his shoulder, a nod. He's helped to his feet but not sent back to work. Instead, he's guided toward the steps leading below deck. That's new. You watch, trying not to make it obvious. "What happens?" you ask quietly to the sailor beside you. He doesn't look at you when he answers. "They rest," he says. The pause that follows is longer than the sentence. And if that doesn't help, you press before you can stop yourself. This time he does glance at you, just briefly. Then they don't. That's all he says, and somehow it's enough. There's no mention of treatment, no talk of recovery, just a simple division. You get better, or you don't. Medical care aboard ships like this was limited at best. Some vessels carried surgeons, especially naval ones, but pirate ships often relied on whatever knowledge the crew had. Basic remedies, crew tools, and a lot of guesswork. Historians still debate how effective these treatments were, but survival often depended less on medicine and more on the individual's resilience. And luck. Mostly luck. By evening, the air feels heavier again. Not physically, emotionally. No one speaks about what's happening, but it lingers in the background of every action, every glance, every small hesitation. You eat your portion of food without really tasting it. Drink your share of water without thinking about it. And when the call comes to head below deck, you follow without delay. Inside, the space feels even more confined than before. Or maybe that's just your perception changing. You settle into your usual spot, the hardwood pressing against your side, the lantern casting its dim, uneven light. The carved charm still hangs above you, unchanged, unbothered, as if none of this matters. The coughing starts again not long after. Closer this time. You close your eyes, trying to focus on the rhythm of the ship instead. The slow rocking, the creaking wood, the distant sound of water against the hull, but the sounds break through, again and again. There's a moment just before sleep takes you when a thought slips in. Uninvited. You're all trapped here. Not just by the ocean, but by each other. The same space, the same air, the same risks. And no matter how careful you are, how quiet, how unnoticed, some things don't need permission to reach you. The lantern flickers slightly, the shadows shifting across the beams. And somewhere in the darkness, another cough echoes softly. You don't know who it is. You don't know how many more will follow, but you understand one thing clearly now. Out here, survival isn't just about storms or strength. It's about what spreads in silence, and whether you're strong enough or lucky enough to avoid it. The first sign that something is different isn't loud. It's quiet. A tension in the air that doesn't belong to storms or sickness. Something sharper, more focused. You notice it in the way people glance toward the horizon more often than usual, in the way conversations drop off mid-sentence, in the way even the most routine tasks seem to carry an edge of anticipation. You follow their gaze. At first you don't see it, just the usual stretch of water, shifting endlessly under the pale light. But then, there, a shape, small, distant, almost easy to dismiss if you weren't looking directly at it. Another ship. Your stomach tightens before your mind fully catches up. No one announces it right away, but word spreads quickly, carried through murmurs and subtle gestures. The crew begins to move, not with the chaotic urgency of a storm, but with something more deliberate. Purpose. "Stay sharp," someone mutters as they pass you. You nod, even though you're not entirely sure what that means yet. The ship adjusts course slightly. You can feel it in the angle of the deck, in the way the wind catches the sails differently. The distant vessel grows clearer, its outline sharpening against the horizon, is not enormous, but it's not small either, big enough to matter. Historically, encounters like this were unpredictable. Not every ship was a target. Some were too heavily armed, others too fast, and some simply not worth the risk. Pirate crews had to make quick decisions based on limited information. Cargo, defences, crew size, all judged from a distance. Historians still argue how often pirates actually engaged in battle versus avoiding it altogether. But judging by what's happening now, this one isn't being avoided. the mood shifts as preparations begin. Weapons are brought out, not in dramatic displays, but quietly, efficiently. You see cutlasses, pistols, and other tools you're not entirely comfortable identifying. They're checked, adjusted, handed off. No one offers you one, not yet. Instead, you're given a different task. Hauling something heavy across the deck, securing loose items, making sure nothing will shift when things become less stable. You don't ask questions, you just move. The other ship grows larger, close enough now that you can see movement on its deck. Figures just like you, preparing in their own way. There's no mistaking it anymore. They see you too. The wind carries faint sounds across the water, distant shouts, the snap of sails, the creak of wood under strain. The space between the two ships shrinks steadily. And then, the first cannon fires. The sound is overwhelming. A deep, thunderous boom that seems to hit your chest as much as your ears. The recoil shakes the ship, a heavy jolt that travels through the deck and up into your legs. For a split second, everything pauses. Then the response comes. Another boom, louder now, closer. Smoke fills the air, thick and acrid, drifting across the deck in uneven waves. It stings your eyes, your throat, making it harder to see, harder to breathe. You freeze. Just for a moment, it's enough. "Move!" someone shouts, grabbing your shoulder and pulling you out of the way as another cannon fires. The blast echoes across the water, followed by the distant impact against the other ship's hull. Splinters fly. You see them, even from here. Tiny fragments of wood bursting outward, catching the light before disappearing. This isn't distant anymore, this is happening. Naval combat during this era was chaotic by nature. Cannons were powerful but imprecise, their effectiveness depending on distance, angle, and sheer luck. Crews had to reload quickly, adjust aim, and brace for return fire, all while maintaining control of the ship itself. Historians still debate how coordinated these battles truly were, or if they often descended into controlled chaos. Standing here now, it feels like the latter. You're handed something, powder maybe, or a tool, and directed toward one of the cannons. The crew around it moves with practiced efficiency, each person knowing their role without needing to speak. You try to follow. Your hands shake slightly, but you focus on the motions. Load. Step back. Cover your ears. Another boom. The cannon fires again, the force pushing air past you in a hot, violent rush. The smell intensifies, a mix of smoke and something metallic that lingers unpleasantly. Across the gap, the other ship responds. A shot lands closer this time. Too close. The impact sends a shock through your vessel, a section of railings splintering under the force. Someone shouts, not in fear, but in acknowledgement. Damage. But not enough. Keep going. The command cuts through the noise, and they do. They all do. You begin to understand something in the middle of it all. There's no pause here. No time to process what's happening, just action. Reaction. Movement. At one point, the ships draw even closer. Close enough that you can see individual faces on the other deck. They look just like the ones around you. Focused, tense, determined. Not villains, not heroes, just people. There's a strange detail you notice in the chaos. A piece of cloth tied near one of the cannons, fluttering wildly despite the smoke and wind. It's marked with a crude symbol, faded but still visible. You don't know what it means, but someone nearby touches it briefly before each shot, almost unconsciously. A ritual, a habit, a way to feel some control in a situation that offers very little. Superstitions run deep in moments like this. Some sailors believed certain actions could influence the outcome of battle. Touching a charm, repeating a phrase, even standing in a specific position during cannon's firing. Rational or not, no one questions it. Not now. The distance closes further. The cannon fire slows. Not because the battle is ending, but because it's changing. Get ready, someone shouts. You don't know what for. Not until you see it. Grappling hooks, thrown across the gap, catching onto the other ship's railing with heavy, deliberate force. Ropes follow, pulled tight as the two vessels are drawn closer together. The shift is immediate. The distance that once felt vast is now almost nothing. You can hear voices clearly, see movements in detail, feel the tension rising in a completely different way. This is no longer about distance, it's about contact. Your breathing quickens, your grip tightens around whatever you're holding, and for a brief moment, just a single, quiet second in the middle of all the noise, you realise something. The cannons were the beginning, not the end. The ships pull closer, wood scraping against wood with a harsh grinding sound. The air feels thicker now, heavier, charged, and as the gap between you and them disappears completely, you understand. This is about to get much more personal. The moment the ships make contact, everything changes. The distance, what little remained of it, vanishes completely, replaced by a jarring, splintering impact as wood crashes against wood. The sound is loud, harsh, final. It vibrates through your feet, up your legs, into your chest. There's no separation anymore, no safety in space, just one unstable surface shared between two groups who have very different intentions. Go! Someone shouts. And suddenly everyone is moving at once. The controlled rhythm you've grown used to disappears entirely, replaced by something faster, sharper. Figures surge forward, crossing over the tangled ropes and hooks that now bind the ships together. You don't move, not immediately. Your body hesitates, caught between instinct and confusion. This isn't like the storm. There's no rope to hold, no clear task to follow, just chaos. A hand shoves you from behind. Move! You stumble forward, closer to the edge where the two ships meet. The gap is narrow now, barely a step across in some places, wider in others where the hulls grind unevenly against each other. You see the other crew clearly now, not as distant shapes, not as silhouettes, as people, close enough to recognize expressions, close enough to see fear, determination, and something else beneath it all, the same thing you feel, uncertainty. Boarding actions like this were among the most dangerous parts of naval encounters. Cannons could damage ships, but capturing one required getting close, forcing crews into direct confrontation. It was fast, unpredictable, and often decided in moments rather than hours. Historians still argue how often these encounters ended in full-scale fighting versus quick surrender. Looking around now, it's clear this isn't going to be quick. You step across. The moment your foot lands on the other ship, it feels wrong. Not physically, the wood is solid enough, but mentally. Like crossing an invisible line you weren't meant to. The noise intensifies immediately. Shouts overlap. Orders blur into each other. The sharp clash of movement fills the air. Not clean, not organised, just constant and disorienting. You grip the object in your hands tighter, something you barely remember being given. Not a weapon exactly, more like a tool. You hold it anyway, because having something feels better than having nothing. People rush past you in both directions, some pushing forward, others stepping back to reposition. It's not a single wave, it's a shifting pattern, constantly adjusting. You try to stay out of the way. That becomes your strategy. Not fighting, not leading, just avoiding. At one point, someone stumbles near you, catching themselves against the railing. Their breathing is sharp, uneven. They glance at you briefly, eyes wide, not in aggression, but in awareness. Then they're gone, pulled back into the movement. You take another step, unsure where to go, when a voice cuts through the noise. Stay with the line. You don't know which line, you pick one. A group of sailors moving along the side of the deck, pushing forward steadily. You follow them, matching their pace as best you can. It's easier this way. Less thinking, more reacting. There's a strange detail you notice as you move. A small chalk marking on the deck beneath your feet. A simple symbol, half smudged, barely visible unless you're looking for it. You step over it without thinking. Later, you'll wonder what it meant. Some ships used markings like that for organisation, designating areas, signalling positions, even marking previous damage. Others may have had more superstitious purposes, symbols meant to bring luck or ward off misfortune. Out here, the difference isn't always clear. The movement slows briefly as your group reaches a more open section of the deck. You pause, not by choice, because there's nowhere else to go. For a moment, everything feels suspended. Then it shifts again. A surge of motion from the opposite side forces your group back slightly. Not retreating, just adjusting. The balance of space changes, pushing you closer to the edge again. Your foot slips, just slightly. Enough to send a sharp jolt of panic through you. You catch yourself against a rope, gripping it tightly until your balance returns. Watch it, someone mutters, steadying you briefly before moving on. No time for more. No time for anything. This is what it's like, you realise. Not grand, not dramatic, just constant, unpredictable pressure. You're not thinking about victory or defeat. You're thinking about staying upright, staying aware, staying out of the worst of it. At some point the noise begins to change, not quieter, but different, less chaotic, more directed. You notice it in the way the crew around you starts to move with clearer purpose again. The initial rush is over. Now it's about control, holding positions, securing areas, preventing movement. The intensity doesn't fade, it focuses. You follow along, still unsure of your exact role, but more certain of one thing: you're still here, which in this moment feels like enough. Naval encounters like this rarely lasted long in the way you might expect. Once one side gained enough control of the deck, the crew, the situation, the outcome became clear quickly. Historians still debate how often crews resisted to the end versus surrendering once that tipping point was reached. Here, now, you can feel that tipping point approaching. The resistance from the other side begins to falter. Not all at once, but in small, noticeable ways. Movements slow, positions shift. The urgency changes tone. You don't see a single defining moment. No dramatic signal. Just a gradual realization spreading through the space. It's ending. The tension eases. Not completely, but enough to breathe. You lower your grip slightly, your hands aching from holding too tight for too long. Around you, the crew begins to reorganize. Voices clearer now, commands more structured. The chaos settles into something more controlled, more familiar. You step back carefully this time, returning toward your own ship across the narrow connection. The wood creaks beneath your feet as you cross, and just like that, you're back. But not the same. You glance once more at the other deck, now quieter, more subdued. Figures move there too, but differently. Slower, more restrained. The space between the ships feels wider again, even though nothing has physically changed. Because now you understand something you didn't before. This isn't just about ships, or cargo, or even survival. It's about moments like that, where everything narrows down to a single objective, and you either move with it or get left behind. The ropes are loosened eventually, the ships beginning to separate once more. The distance returns slowly but surely until the other vessel is just that again. Another ship, not your concern anymore. You stand there for a moment, breathing in the salt air, your chest rising and falling a little slower now. You made it through. Again. Not because you were ready, not because you were brave, but because you stayed. And out here, that still counts. The aftermath is quieter than you expect. Not silent, but quieter. The noise doesn't vanish all at once. It fades in layers. First the shouting stops, then the urgent commands. Then even the restless movement begins to settle into something slower, more deliberate. What's left is maintenance, adjustment, recovery. You stand on the deck, breathing a little heavier than usual, your hands still tight around nothing in particular. It takes a moment to realize you're no longer holding the tool you carried across. You don't remember when you let it go. No one points it out. No one seems to care. Because now the focus has shifted. The ship creaks softly as it pulls away from the other vessel, the ropes and hooks that once bound them being drawn back in. The distance grows slowly, steadily, until the other ship becomes just another shape on the horizon again. You watch it for a moment. Then someone taps your shoulder. Don't stare, they say. Work. Of course. There's always work. You're handed a bundle of cloth, rough, worn, already stained in places, and directed toward a section of the deck that looks different. Not damaged exactly, just disturbed. You kneel, unsure what to do at first until someone nearby demonstrates. Wipe, rinse, repeat. The motions are simple, almost identical to the scrubbing you did before. Only now, the context feels heavier. You follow the pattern anyway, because that's what you've learned to do. Historically, the aftermath of naval encounters required immediate attention. Ships needed to be repaired, supplies reorganized, and the crew returned to working condition as quickly as possible. There was little time to dwell on what had just happened. Historians still argue how crews processed these moments, whether they reflected on them at all, or simply moved forward out of necessity. Standing here now, it feels like the latter. You wipe the deck again, focusing on the motion rather than the meaning. It's easier that way. Around you, others are doing the same. Some repairing lines, others checking the hull, a few moving supplies from one place to another with quiet efficiency. No one lingers. No one pauses longer than necessary. The routine has returned, or at least something close to it. There's a strange detail you notice as you work. Near one of the cannons, someone has placed a small object. A coin, maybe, or a piece of metal, wedged carefully into a crack in the wood. It wasn't there before, you're sure of it. You glance at the sailor nearby. "What's that for?" you ask, keeping your voice low. He shrugs. "Luck," he says. That seems to be the answer for many things here. Objects placed, knots tied, small rituals repeated, not because anyone is certain they work, but because not doing them feels worse. Superstitions often grew stronger after events like this. Surviving something unpredictable tends to reinforce the idea that certain actions, no matter how small, might have made a difference. Rational or not, they become part of the rhythm. You finish your section and move on to the next task without being told. Carrying supplies this time, shifting barrels, restacking crates that were knocked out of place during the encounter. Your body moves more automatically now. Less hesitation, less confusion. Still not confident, but functional. At one point you pass by a group gathered near the stern. They're speaking quietly, voices low enough that you can't catch everything, but you pick up fragments. Fair share. Captain decides. Later. Ah, the loot. It hadn't even crossed your mind until now. Pirate crews were often motivated by the promise of shared spoils. Unlike naval ships, where pay was fixed, pirates sometimes divided captured goods among the crew based on agreed-upon shares. Captains and officers typically received larger portions, but even lower-ranking members could benefit. Historians still debate how fair these distributions truly were in practice. From where you stand, watching from a distance, it's clear that whatever the system is, you're not part of the conversation yet. And maybe not for a while, you move on. Because standing still draws attention, and attention, you've learned, is rarely helpful. As the day stretches on, fatigue begins to settle in more deeply. Not the sharp exhaustion of sudden effort, but a slower, heavier kind that builds over time. Your arms feel heavier, your steps less certain, but the work doesn't stop. It just changes pace. Eventually you're sent below deck again, this time not for rest, but for storage. You help secure items that shifted during the encounter, pushing crates back into place, tightening ropes, making sure everything is stable. The air down here still carries that damp heaviness from before, mixed now with something new, not stronger, just different. You don't think about it for long. Instead, you focus on the task, adjusting a loose rope around a barrel. Your hands move more confidently now, the knots coming together with less trial and error. That's new, you notice it. And for a brief moment there's something almost like satisfaction. Not pride, just recognition. You're learning, whether you wanted to or not. When you return to the deck, the light has begun to soften again. The sun hangs lower, casting long shadows across the ship. The ocean has returned to its steady rhythm, as if nothing unusual had happened. It's almost peaceful. Almost. The crew moves more slowly now, the urgency of earlier replaced by a quieter kind of effort. Tasks are completed without haste, but without delay either. A balance. You take a moment, just a moment, to breathe. The air feels different now, cleaner, or maybe that's just your perception shifting again. Either way, it doesn't last. Keep moving, a voice reminds you, and you do, because stopping isn't part of the routine. Not really. As evening settles in, the call to head below finally comes again. This time, your body responds without hesitation. The promise of rest, even imperfect rest, is enough. You descend into the familiar space, the low beams, the dim lantern light. It feels less foreign now, still uncomfortable, still heavy, but known. You settle into your place, adjusting slightly to find the least uncomfortable position. Around you, others do the same, the quiet sounds of movement filling the space. No one talks much tonight, not more than necessary. The events of the day linger, not openly, not discussed, but present. You can feel it in the silence, in the slower movements, in the way people seem just a little more inward than before. You lie back, staring briefly at the beam above you. The carved charm is still there, unchanged, constant, as if marking time in its own quiet way. Your body aches, your hands burn slightly, your mind feels full, but also distant, like it's already beginning to file everything away, smoothing over the sharper edges. Because tomorrow, or whatever comes next, will be the same. Work, movement, survival. The ship creaks softly around you, the lantern flickers, and the sounds of the crew fade into a low, steady hum. And as sleep finally begins to take hold, one thought settles in quietly. You made it through something today. Something bigger than you expected, and yet, out here, it's already becoming just another part of the routine. The days after the encounter settle into something quieter, but not easier. If anything, the silence makes you notice more. Not the loud things, not the obvious ones, but the small, persistent habits that thread through life on the ship like invisible lines holding everything together. At first, you think it's coincidence. A sailor stepping over a specific section of deck every time he passes, even when it would be easier not to. Another touching the same beam before climbing the rigging. Someone else pausing briefly at the stern at sunset, murmuring something too soft to hear. Individually, they mean nothing. Together, they form a pattern. You start to see it everywhere. Superstitions. They're not announced. No one gathers the crew to explain them. But they're followed with quiet consistency, woven into daily routines as naturally as tying knots or hauling lines. Historically, sailors were among the most superstitious groups, and for good reason. Life at sea was unpredictable, often uncontrollable, and filled with dangers that couldn't always be explained. Rituals and beliefs offered a sense of control, however small, in an environment that provided very little. Historians still argue whether these practices genuinely affected morale or simply reflected it. From where you stand, it feels like both. You notice your first direct encounter with it during a routine task. You're carrying a coil of rope across the deck when you instinctively step over a narrow seam in the wood. Barely visible, just a slight shift in the planks. It doesn't seem important, but someone notices. "Don't step there," they say quickly. You pause, looking down. "Why?" They shrug. "Bad luck." That's it. No explanation. No story to go with it. Just a simple rule. You nod and adjust your path, stepping around it instead. It feels unnecessary. But you follow it anyway. Because by now, you've learned that understanding isn't always required. Compliance is. As the day continues, you begin to spot more of these quiet rules. A sailor refuses to whistle while working the sails, even when the rhythm might help pass the time. Another carefully avoids mentioning certain words, storm, sinking, even death, replacing them with softer alternatives. You try to keep track of them, not because you believe in them, but because not following them might draw attention. And attention, as always, is something you'd rather avoid. There's a strange detail you notice near the galley area. A small nail hammered into the wood, slightly bent, with a thin piece of string tied around it. The string is frayed, worn, clearly not new. You watch as one of the crew passes by and briefly taps it with 2 fingers, not stopping, not pausing, just a quick, practiced motion. You glance at another sailor. "What's that?" you ask quietly. He looks at it, then back at you. "Keel charm," he says. "That doesn't clarify much." "Stops the ship from turning against you," he adds, as if that explains everything. You don't ask further. Some beliefs are meant to be accepted, not analysed. Sailors across different regions carried countless variations of these rituals. Some believed certain objects could protect the ship. Others avoided actions they thought might anger the sea. There were even stories of lucky crew members, individuals whose presence was believed to influence the outcome of voyages. Historians still debate how widespread these beliefs were, but their persistence suggests they served a purpose beyond logic. Out here, logic isn't always enough. Midday passes in the usual rhythm of work, but your awareness has shifted. You're not just watching tasks anymore, you're watching behaviour, and slowly, without meaning to, you begin to adjust your own. You avoid the seam in the deck. You don't whistle. You hesitate before speaking certain words, choosing others instead. It's subtle, unintentional at first, but it happens. Because blending in isn't just about doing the work, it's about following the patterns, even the ones that don't make sense. There's a moment in the afternoon when the wind drops unexpectedly, leaving the sails hanging slightly slack. The ship slows, its movement gentler, quieter. For a brief time, everything feels suspended. The crew notices immediately. A few glance upward. One mutters something under his breath. Another reaches up and adjusts a small knot tied near the rigging, tightening it slightly before stepping back. You watch, curious. "What was that?" you ask. "Wind's gone lazy," the sailor replies. "And the knot?" He shrugs. "Helps." "Of course it does." There's no sarcasm in his voice, no hint of doubt, just quiet certainty. You nod, even though you don't fully understand. Because at this point, questioning feels less useful than observing. The wind returns gradually, the sails filling again, the ship picking up its steady motion. The moment passes, but the impression lingers. These rituals aren't occasional, they're constant. A framework layered over the physical work, shaping how people interact with the unpredictable world around them. And now, you're part of it. Not fully, not consciously, but enough. As the day continues, you catch yourself doing something without thinking. You approach the same section of deck, the seam you were warned about earlier, and step around it automatically. You don't even notice until after. You pause briefly, looking back at the spot. Then you move on. Because stopping to question it would mean admitting something you're not quite ready to face. You're adapting, not just to the work, not just to the conditions, but to the mindset. The belief that small actions matter, that patterns can influence outcomes, that in a place where so much is beyond your control, even the illusion of control is worth holding on to. As evening approaches, the sky softens into muted colours, the sea reflecting the fading light in slow, steady ripples. The ship moves calmly now, as if the earlier chaos never happened. The crew's pace slows slightly, though the work never fully stops. You find yourself near the stern again, watching the horizon without meaning to. It looks the same as always, endless, unchanging, and yet, everything about your experience of it feels different now. There's a quiet moment where one of the older sailors stands beside you. He doesn't say anything at first, just looks out at the water. Then, almost absent-mindedly, he taps the railing twice, a soft, deliberate motion. You notice it. Of course you do. "Why twice?" you ask. He glances at you, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Once is for luck," he says. "Twice is to make sure." You let that sit for a moment. Then, without thinking, you tap the railing twice as well. He doesn't comment, just nods slightly and moves on. And you're left standing there, staring out at the endless sea, realizing something quietly unsettling. You didn't question it. You didn't hesitate. You just did it. Because out here, where the rules are unspoken and the dangers are constant, even the smallest habits begin to feel important. Necessary, even. The light fades further, the call to head below eventually coming as it always does. You follow. Because that's what you do now. You follow the rhythm, the routines, the rules, spoken and unspoken alike. And as you settle into the dim, cramped space once more, the ship rocking gently beneath you, one thought drifts through your mind before sleep takes over. You came here as an outsider, someone who didn't belong, but piece by piece, habit by habit, that's starting to change. The next stretch of days feels quieter. Not peaceful exactly, but less intense. The ship settles into a steady rhythm again, the kind that almost tricks you into thinking this life might be manageable. Almost. The work continues, of course. It always does. But there are moments now, small scattered gaps where nothing urgent is happening. No shouting, no sudden commands, just the slow creak of wood, the steady push of wind against the sails, and the endless rise and fall beneath your feet. You notice it first in your own body. You're still tired, but it's a different kind of tired now, less sharp, more familiar. Your muscles ache in predictable ways, your hands move with a bit more certainty, and even the constant motion of the ship feels normal. That's the strange part. You've adjusted. Not completely, not comfortably. But enough that the chaos of before has softened into something routine. Historically, long stretches at sea often alternated between intense bursts of activity and prolonged periods of relative calm. These quieter moments were essential, not just for physical recovery, but for maintaining some sense of mental balance. Historians still argue how sailors coped with the monotony, especially during extended voyages with little change in scenery. Standing here now, staring out at the endless horizon, you begin to understand why that question matters. Because the calm has its own kind of weight. The morning begins like any other. You wake to the low murmur of movement, the dim light filtering through the cracks above. The air is still thick, still heavy, but it feels less oppressive now, more like something you've learned to ignore. You stretch slightly, feeling the familiar stiffness in your back and shoulders, then shift carefully to stand. Around you, others are already moving. No rush, no urgency, just the quiet continuation of routine. You follow. Up on deck, the light is soft, the sun still low. The sea stretches out in every direction, smooth and almost glass-like in places, broken only by the ship's steady passage. It's calm. And for a moment, you let yourself notice it. The sound of the water, the rhythm of the ship, the absence of chaos. It doesn't last long. Line check, someone calls, and just like that, the stillness breaks, not into panic, but into motion. You move to your assigned task, checking ropes, adjusting tension, making sure everything holds as it should. Your hands work more efficiently now, the knots coming easier, the patterns more familiar. That's new. You don't struggle as much, you don't hesitate as long, and while no one says it outright, you can feel the difference in how others react to you. Less correction. Fewer sharp glances. You're not invisible anymore, but you're also not a problem, somewhere in between. There's a moment later in the morning when you find yourself near the galley again. The smell is the same. Heavy, slightly sour, mixed with something that might once have been appealing. Today's ration is handed out without much ceremony. Hard biscuit, a bit of salted meat, water measured carefully. You take it, nodding slightly and move aside. The biscuit is just as hard as before, though you've learned to soften it slightly before eating. The meat is tolerable. You don't think about it too much, because thinking about it doesn't change it. Pirate crews, much like naval ones, relied heavily on preserved foods, hardtack, salted meat, dried legumes. Fresh supplies were rare and often reserved for the beginning of a voyage or after successful resupply. There's even a peculiar tidbit you overhear from one of the older sailors. He taps his biscuit against the barrel before eating. Knocks the worms out, he mutters. You pause. Worms? He shrugs. Extra protein if you miss 'em. You're not sure if he's joking. You decide not to ask. Some details are better left, unconfirmed. The day continues in this slow, steady way. Tasks come and go, none particularly urgent, none entirely optional. You find yourself moving from one to another without needing to be told every step. That's new too. A quiet kind of independence, or maybe just familiarity. At one point you're assigned to assist near the rigging, not climbing, yet, but managing lines from below as others move above. You watch them carefully, noting how they shift their weight, how they grip the ropes, how they move with a kind of practiced ease. It looks impossible, and yet, a few days ago, even tying a basic knot felt the same way. Progress, you suppose, even if it doesn't feel like much. The wind remains steady, the sea cooperative. The ship glides forward with a kind of quiet determination, as if following a path only it understands. There's a moment in the afternoon when someone begins humming, softly, barely noticeable at first. You glance over, half expecting someone to tell them to stop. After all, you remember the unspoken rule about whistling. But humming, it seems, is allowed. Others join in gradually, not loudly, not in unison, but enough to create a faint, almost soothing background sound. It's unexpected. A reminder that even here, small comforts exist. Unplanned, unspoken, but real. You don't join in. Not yet. But you don't avoid it either. You just listen. As the sun begins its slow descent, the light shifts again, casting everything in warmer tones. The ship feels different in this light. Softer somehow, less harsh. It doesn't change the reality, but it changes the feeling. And sometimes that's enough. You find yourself at the railing again, watching the water slip past. The endless motion, the constant rhythm. It's starting to feel less overwhelming, more like background noise, something that simply is. The older sailor from before passes by, tapping the railing once. Then twice. You notice. Of course you do. And this time, you do it too. Without hesitation, without thinking. Tap, tap. He glances at you briefly, gives a small nod and continues on. No words needed, because at this point the gesture says enough. You're learning the patterns, not just the work, not just the rules, but the quiet language of the ship. As evening settles in, the call to head below comes again, as steady and predictable as everything else. You follow, because that's what you do. The space below deck feels less suffocating now, still cramped, still heavy, but familiar enough that your body doesn't resist it the same way. You settle into your place, adjusting slightly, finding that same almost comfortable position. Around you, the crew does the same. The low hum of voices, the occasional shift of movement, it all blends into a steady background sound. And as you lie there, staring up at the beam with its carved mark, one thought drifts quietly through your mind. This life hasn't become easier. Not really, but it has become known. And somehow, that makes it just a little more bearable. At some point, the idea of treasure stops feeling exciting. You don't remember exactly when it happens. Maybe it's after your first real encounter. Maybe it's after the long days of work that follow. Or maybe it's during one of these quieter stretches when your mind finally has space to wander. But the thought shifts. Treasure, once something distant, glittering, almost mythical, becomes something else entirely. Practical, distant, almost irrelevant. You notice it when a crate is brought up from below deck. It's not announced. No one gathers around in awe. There's no dramatic reveal. No shining gold spilling into the sunlight like the stories might suggest. It's just a crate. Heavy, worn, carried by two men who look more focused on balance than excitement. You watch as it's set down near the stern, where a few of the higher-ranking crew members begin inspecting its contents. You can't see much from where you stand, just glimpses, metal maybe, or cloth. Nothing that immediately stands out. No glow, no sparkle, just objects. Historically, pirate treasure was often far less glamorous than popular imagination suggests. Cargoes frequently included trade goods, textiles, spices, sugar, tobacco, items that could be sold later rather than immediately admired. Historians still argue how often pirates actually encountered large quantities of gold or silver versus more mundane goods. From what you can see now, it leans toward the mundane. You're called away before you can observe much more. Another task, another routine, because whatever's in that crate, it doesn't change your responsibilities, it doesn't lighten your workload, it doesn't improve your rations, at least not immediately, and that's the part that settles in. The disconnect between the idea of treasure and the reality of it. Later in the day, you overhear fragments of conversation again. The same group as before, gathered near the stern, voices low but more animated this time. Cloth's good quality. Spices'll fetch something. Coins, maybe a few. You pause just long enough to catch the tone. It's not excitement, it's calculation, assessment, value, not wonder. You move on because lingering too long isn't wise, but the impression sticks. This isn't a storybook. This isn't about chests overflowing with gold coins waiting to be claimed. It's about trade, profit, survival. There's a peculiar tidbit you pick up from one of the older sailors later that afternoon. He's examining a small piece of metal, thin, slightly bent, nothing particularly impressive. "Spanish coin," he mutters. You lean closer. "That's it?" you ask before you can stop yourself. He glances at you, amused. "What were you expecting?" he says. "A mountain?" You hesitate. "Well, kind of." He chuckles softly, shaking his head. "Stories make it bigger," he says. "Reality makes it useful." That line lingers, because it sums up everything you're starting to understand. Treasure isn't about spectacle, it's about function, what it can be traded for, what it can provide, and for you, right now, it provides nothing. The day continues, and you find yourself assigned to help move some of the newly acquired goods below deck. Crates, bundles, sacks, each one heavier than it looks, each one requiring careful handling to avoid damage. You don't know exactly what's inside most of them. You're not meant to. Your role is simple: move, stack, secure, repeat. As you work, you notice something else. No one rushes. No one treats the cargo with urgency or excitement. There's care, yes, precision, but not eagerness. Because this is just another part of the process, another step in a long chain that leads somewhere else. Some port, some exchange, some future moment where these goods become something more useful. Out here, they're just weight. And weight, as you've learned, is something you carry, not something you celebrate. There's a moment when you're securing a crate with a rope, tightening it into place so it won't shift with the ship's movement. Your hands move almost automatically now, the knot forming with practiced ease. You pause briefly, looking at it. It's solid, reliable. You didn't struggle. You didn't second guess. That's new. You've crossed another small threshold. You don't say anything, no one notices, but you do, and that's enough. As the afternoon drifts toward evening, the light softens again, casting long shadows across the deck. The ship moves steadily, the sea calm, the wind consistent. It's almost peaceful. Almost. You find yourself near the railing once more, watching the horizon, the endless line where sky meets water. It looks the same as always, unchanged, indifferent, and you realise something quietly. The treasure doesn't change that. It doesn't make the sea less vast. It doesn't make the work easier. It doesn't make you safer. It's just another element of this life, not the centre of it, not the goal, just part of the system. Pirate crews may have been drawn together by the promise of shared profit, but daily life was shaped far more by routine, discipline, and survival than by dreams of wealth. Historians still debate whether most pirates saw significant financial gain at all, or if the risks often outweighed the rewards. Standing here now, feeling the weight of the day in your limbs, you can't help but lean toward the latter. Because whatever reward exists, it's distant, uncertain, and definitely not immediate. The older sailor passes by again, the same one who showed you the coin earlier. He pauses beside you, leaning slightly against the railing. Thinking about it, he asks. The treasure, you reply. He nods. You consider your answer. Not really, you say finally. He smiles faintly. Good, he says. Means you're starting to understand. He taps the railing once, then twice. You watch his hand, and then you do the same. Tap, tap. The motion feels natural now, expected, part of the rhythm. He nods again, then moves on, and you're left standing there, staring out at the endless sea, the fading light reflecting softly across its surface. The ship creaks gently beneath you, the sails shifting slightly with the wind. Everything feels steady, predictable, and yet, you know that won't last, because out here, calm is temporary, routine is fragile, and whatever comes next will demand the same thing it always does: work, endurance, adaptation. The call to head below comes as it always does, and you follow without hesitation, because that's what you do now. You follow the rhythm, even when the meaning behind it changes. As you settle into your place once more, the dim light flickering softly, the familiar sounds surrounding you, one thought drifts quietly through your mind. The stories were wrong. Not entirely, but enough. Because the real treasure out here isn't what you imagined, and it's not what keeps you going. Not anymore. The tension doesn't arrive all at once. It builds slowly, so gradually that at first you almost miss it. A sharper tone here, a longer glance there. Voices that drop just a little lower when you pass by. Nothing obvious. Nothing you can point to and say that's the moment something changed. And yet, something has. You feel it in the rhythm of the ship. Not the physical motion. That steady rise and fall remains the same, but in the way people move within it. The ease that settled in during the calmer days has thinned, replaced by something tighter, more watchful. You notice it during a routine task. You're hauling a line with two others, the work familiar now, your movement steady and practiced. But the sailor across from you snaps suddenly, not at you, but at the one beside him. Pull properly, he mutters. The tone isn't loud, but it's sharp, unnecessary. The other sailor doesn't respond, just adjusts his grip and continues. No argument, no escalation. But the air shifts, because it didn't used to sound like that. Historically, life aboard pirate ships, despite their reputation for rebellion, often relied on strict codes of conduct. Many crews operated under agreed-upon rules, outlining everything from shares of loot to punishments for misconduct. And those punishments, they were rarely light. Historians still argue whether these systems were more democratic than naval discipline or simply different in form. From where you stand now, watching the subtle tightening of behaviour, it feels like control, however it's structured, is always present, always waiting. The next sign comes later in the day. A small mistake, not yours. Someone misjudges a knot, leaving a line looser than it should be. It's caught quickly, before it causes any real problem, but the reaction is immediate. The overseer steps in, voice low but firm. "You check your work," he says. The sailor nods quickly. "Yes." Again. No shouting, no dramatic punishment, just repetition, correction, and the unspoken understanding that next time it might not be so mild. You watch carefully, not because you're involved, but because you're learning. Mistakes aren't ignored, they're remembered. And out here, where everything depends on everything else, even small errors carry weight. There's a peculiar detail you notice near the stern later that afternoon. A length of rope, thicker than usual, coiled neatly, but set apart from the rest. You've seen plenty of rope by now, but this one feels different. You glance at the older sailor nearby. "What's that for?" you ask quietly. He looks at it, then back at you. "Reminder," he says. That's not very specific. "Of what?" He shrugs. Depends who's looking at it. That answer doesn't settle anything, but it doesn't need to. Because the implication is clear enough. Punishment doesn't always need to be visible to be understood. Sometimes the possibility is enough. Throughout maritime history, various forms of discipline existed, ranging from loss of rations to physical punishment, depending on the severity of the offence and the structure of the crew. Even in pirate crews, where leadership could be more fluid, authority still had to be maintained somehow. Historians still debate how often extreme punishments were actually carried out versus simply threatened. But standing here now, you don't need to see it to feel it. As the day continues, you notice the conversations again. Low voices, quick glances, groups forming and dissolving more carefully than before. You pass by one such cluster, catching fragments as you move. "Not fair," Captain decides. "We'll see." You don't linger, but the tone is different from before. Less about calculation, more about disagreement. It doesn't erupt into anything. Not yet, but it simmers, and you can feel it. Because tension, like everything else on this ship, has a rhythm. It builds, it shifts, it waits. You find yourself more careful now, more aware of your own actions, double-checking knots, watching where you step, listening more than you speak. Because blending in isn't just about following routine anymore. It's about avoiding friction, and friction, out here, can spread quickly. There's a moment in the late afternoon when the wind shifts slightly, not enough to cause concern, but enough to require adjustment. The crew moves to respond, lines pulled, sails trimmed, the ship adapting to the new direction. It's routine. But the coordination feels tighter, more precise, less room for error. You follow along, your hands moving with practiced familiarity, your focus sharper than usual. No one says it outright, but everyone feels it. The margin for mistakes has narrowed, and no one wants to be the one who crosses it. As the sun begins to lower, casting that familiar golden light across the deck, the ship looks almost peaceful again. Almost. But the underlying tension doesn't fade with the light. It lingers, quiet, persistent, like a storm you can't yet see, but know is somewhere out there, waiting. There's a moment near the railing, your now familiar place, when the older sailor joins you again. He doesn't speak immediately, just looks out at the horizon. You mirror him, your gaze following the endless line where sky meets sea. "It's building," he says finally. You don't ask what. You already know. "Does it always?" you reply. He considers that. "Not always," he says, "but often enough." He taps the railing once, then twice. You watch his hand, then follow. Tap, tap. The motion feels steadier now, less like imitation, more like habit. He nods slightly, then glances at you. "Just keep your head down," he adds. Simple advice. But out here, simple is often all you get. The call to head below comes as it always does, but tonight the descent feels different, quieter, heavier. The space below deck seems more crowded, even though nothing has changed physically. The air feels thicker, the silence more pronounced. People settle in with fewer words, fewer movements, as if conserving energy for something not yet arrived. You find your place, adjusting as you always do, your body already anticipating the discomfort. It's familiar now, predictable. But your mind doesn't settle as easily. It lingers on the small things, the sharp tone, the loose knot, the quiet arguments, the rope coiled at the stern, all the pieces that don't mean much on their own, but together form something larger, something waiting. The ship creaks softly around you, the lantern flickers, the low hum of breathing fills the space, and as you lie there staring up at that same carved beam, one thought drifts through your mind before sleep begins to take hold. Out here, danger doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it builds in silence. The change, when it finally comes, is almost quiet. Not in sound. There's still the creak of wood, the pull of rope, the steady breath of the sea, but in feeling. The tension that had been building, tightening slowly over the past days, doesn't snap the way you might expect. It settles, not gone, not resolved, just contained. You notice it first in the way people move. Still careful, still watchful, but less sharp. The edges have softened slightly, like a storm that passed somewhere nearby without fully breaking over you. Whatever was simmering hasn't disappeared, but it hasn't boiled over either. And out here that counts as something. The routine resumes, if it ever truly stopped. Lines are checked, sails adjusted, task completed in that steady, practiced rhythm you've come to know so well. You move through it all with a kind of quiet awareness. Not new anymore, not completely, but no longer entirely out of place either. There's a moment in the morning when you're assigned to the deck near the bow. The sea stretches ahead, endless and familiar, the ship cutting through it with that same steady determination. You pause briefly, just long enough to take it in. The horizon, the light, the motion. It doesn't feel overwhelming anymore, just present. Historically, many pirate voyages didn't end in dramatic final battles or buried treasure, but in gradual dispersal, crews splitting, ships docking, lives shifting back toward land in uncertain ways. Historians still argue how many pirates successfully transitioned out of this life, versus those who remained tied to it. Standing here now, you begin to understand why that question is so difficult to answer. Because this life doesn't have a clear ending. It just changes. There's a peculiar calm that settles over the ship as the day progresses. Not the fragile calm of earlier, but something steadier, more grounded. The kind that comes not from the absence of tension, but from learning how to live with it. You notice it in yourself most of all. Your movements are smoother now, your decisions quicker. You don't wait for every instruction. You anticipate, you adjust, you act. That's new and slightly unsettling. Because it means something has shifted inside you. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough. There's a small moment during the afternoon when you're helping secure a section of rigging. The knot comes together easily, your hands working without hesitation. You test it. Solid. Reliable. You don't think about it, you just know. And that knowledge feels different. Less like learning, more like belonging. There's a conversation you overhear later, near the stern again. The same voices, though the tone has changed. Port soon? Split shares? Then what? You don't hear the rest. But you don't need to, because the idea settles in quickly. This journey, whatever it is, won't last forever. It will end, or change, or break apart into something else. And you'll be part of that, whether you're ready or not. There's an odd tidbit you catch from one of the older sailors as he passes by. He's carrying a small object, wooden, carved, worn smooth by time. First ship I served on, he mutters, almost to himself. You glance at it. You kept it, you ask. He nods. Reminder, he says. Of what, you wonder? But you don't ask. Because by now, you've learned that some answers aren't meant to be explained. They're meant to be carried. The day continues, steady and uneventful in the way that now feels almost rare. No sudden shifts, no sharp commands, just the quiet, continuous motion of work and sea blending together. You find yourself at the railing again as the sun begins to lower, the light stretching long across the water. It looks the same as always, and yet it feels different, Because you are. You tap the railing once, then twice. The motion is automatic now, unquestioned. A habit, like any other. The older sailor notices, gives a small nod and continues on. No words needed. Because at this point, there's nothing left to explain. The call to head below comes one last time. At least it feels that way. Not because it's the final night, but because something about it feels complete. You descend with the others, the familiar space greeting you with its dim light and steady hum. It doesn't feel as oppressive anymore. Still cramped, still heavy, but known. You settle into your place, your body adjusting without effort, your mind quieter than it has been in days. Around you, the crew does the same. No tension, no sharp edges, just quiet. The ship creaks softly, the lantern flickers, and the endless motion beneath you continues as it always has. And as you lie there, staring up at that same carved beam, one thought settles gently into place. You didn't choose this life. Not at the beginning, but you endured it, adapted to it, learned its rhythms, its rules, its quiet language, and somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling entirely Chujni and started feeling familiar. Not home, not comfort, but something close enough to understand. The motion of the ship slows in your awareness, not because it has changed, but because your mind begins to drift with it, rising and falling in the same steady rhythm. The sounds soften, the creak of wood, the distant shift of rope, the low breathing of those around you blending into a single gentle hum. Out there, beyond the hull, the sea stretches endlessly, dark and calm, carrying the ship forward without effort, without urgency. You don't need to see it, you can feel it. And for the first time, that feeling isn't unsettling, it's steady, predictable, almost soothing. The thoughts that once crowded your mind begin to loosen, drifting apart like ripples fading across water. The sharp edges of the day soften, the weight of the work easing into something lighter. Nothing demands your attention anymore. Nothing pulls you forward. You're simply here, resting, drifting. The carved beam above you blurs slightly as your eyes grow heavier, the flicker of the lantern dimming into a soft, distant glow. And as the ship continues its quiet journey through the dark, endless sea, you let yourself follow that rhythm. Slow, steady, unbroken, until even that fades.